Okay, we're here today. We're going to talk about Prison of Self. That's with myself, Chris. And we also have Adam. Say hello, Adam.
Hi Chris, how are you?
Good. And Samar.
Hi there, everyone.
Yeah, the Prison of Self. I guess the first question to I'm going to throw at you guys is what do you think the Prison of Self means? What's that title mean? Maybe Adam, do you want to go first?
Oh dear. I think that um, self is a bit difficult, but to me that conjures up images of selfishness, and the prison of self, I suppose, is when a person becomes captive to their own selfishness and greed, potentially.
Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any right or wrong answers here. It's whatever we think. Cool. Yeah. What about you, Summer?
To me, prison of self is where we are really our own worst enemies, and we create this. Um, our thoughts basically creates a prison for us. We create a prison for ourselves because of our thoughts.
So, okay. So our thoughts create a prison for ourselves. Okay. That. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Um, I guess I'm gonna maybe be a little bit more maybe sort of theoretical here. When I think about this one, I guess I think of this idea that I don't know, maybe is common in the Bahai the Bahai community or the Bahai ideas, which thinks of a person as a horse and a rider, and the rider is the spiritual self, and the horse is the animal self. So the prison, I guess, would be when the animal self is controlling us. Um, so I think making that distinction, I guess, between the animal self and the spiritual self is important when we think about this concept of self. So they're just my thoughts. I don't think there's any right or wrong answers here, but it's kind of interesting to explore these concepts. So we might go. We've got some quotes here, so we might go to the first quote. Um, which I'll read out, and then we'll maybe have a chat about, or we'll just comment on this one. So freedom is not a matter of place, but of condition. I was happy in that prison. For those days were passed in the path of service. To me, prison was freedom. Troubles are a rest to me. Death is life. To be despised is honour. Therefore, I was full of happiness all through that prison time. When one is released from the prison of self, that is indeed freedom. For self is the greatest prison. When this release takes place, one can never be imprisoned, unless, sorry, unless one accepts dire vicissitudes, not with dull resignation, but with radiant acquiescence. One cannot attain this freedom. And that's from Abdul Baha, from the Bahai writings. Um, does anyone want to maybe comment on that one?
Oh, this is such a difficult one to really wrap your head around. Troubles are a rest. Um, to be despised is honor. I mean, I suppose if you're a rebel and you're despised by your enemies, you could, take some pride in that. But I don't really think that that's the connotation at all here. Um, so, in a context, it's difficult to really wrap your head around this one.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
There
So,
Mm.
is a lot in there.
So should we look at the first line? So freedom is not a matter of place, but of condition.
hmm.
So that's kind of the opposite of what we'd normally think. You'd normally think, well, at the moment, we're in lockdown, so I would, with the COVID-19 virus, I'd suggest that I'm not feeling very free at the moment. I'm feeling a bit unfree in lockdown.
Hmm.
Um, so we think of being imprisoned or imprisoned in our homes as a lack of freedom, but Abdul Baha says here, freedom's not a matter of place but of condition.
I mean that's easy enough to understand when you consider it. That it's like a whole conversation around heaven and hell. I've seen people who are literally their life is hell, and they have all the material things that they could need, but when you look at what's going on within their life, within their thoughts, you say, oh, that person's life is a living hell. And other people are happy and joyful, even with little. And you could say, okay, in that instance, I can understand that the person's condition is by far the main driver, or apparently the only thing at the end of the day that determines happiness or not is that condition.
Yeah, so you bring up, I think that's a really good point, where it's probably a term that most of us know about, where we consider life to be a living hell. That's, yeah, I guess that's a good point. Sama, do you any thoughts there? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to actually explore the word condition. Does it really only mean our physical surrounding, or is it, going back to what I was saying earlier, is it the condition of our thought as well?
I think I read that as being a condition of mind. So freedom is not a matter of place, but of condition.
Mm.
Yeah. So I think you're right. That's definitely a condition of mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I see it
Well,
as
well,
interwoven, really. It's
uh,
both. You know, elaborating on what Adam was saying in regards to, wherever you are living, it could be a living hell. So then it goes to our thoughts as to how do we perceive that environment that we're in. And right now we are locked down. For some, it's actually not a bad thing, um, because they're quite comfortable to be in their own company, in their own homes, and not go out. But for others who are very social beings, that's actually like a prison sentence to them because they're confined, and so that plays up on their psyche, um, and so they see it as a prison.
that's a really good point. So if you're more social and you're stuck alone, that's going to be a prison. Whereas if you're more of an introvert, being alone might actually be quite fine. Is that pretty
Yeah,
much?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah. Um, so maybe I don't know, with the concept of prison. Then what else do we understand as prison being? How would you define prison?
It's really, for me, it's more how we perceive things. It's not a location, a place, or thing. It's really how we want to see things. Um, yeah.
yeah, I think we're all prisoners in one way or another. I mean, nobody knows their own capability. Nobody knows the potential of the human soul. The mind is this vast, untapped expanse that we really just guess at, but we barely scratch the surface at the end of the day. And it's our own limitations that are largely we impose upon ourselves, um, that confine us. And I suppose the more narrowly we confine ourselves to a particular set of thoughts, the the tighter our prison cell becomes.
Yeah, actually, I mean that's another really interesting way to look at it. So, in a sense, um, I mean, if you have potential to be something, say if you got the potential to be a marathon runner, but you never get the opportunity to exercise that, you never get put into the position where you run a marathon, then in a sense that kind of potential is locked up within you, imprisoned within you maybe. Is that kind of, am I getting, I don't know.
Well, yeah, kind of like that. I mean, it comes back to the idea that you posed in the beginning, that there is actually two elements to a human being. One is the self, which is the animal sort of self, the thing that's always its cravings and desires and things like that. And we might say that that's sort of the narrowest end of the spectrum for human potential.
Mm-hmm.
These things, we have to look after our physical condition. These are all important, but they're, you would think, the beginning of human potential. And ours is to stretch out beyond that into, arts and science and concepts and endeavors far beyond the narrow confines of, like, the cow that just occupies itself with eating all day, sort of thing. We can go further than that. And I think the further we stretch out, the more we broaden our horizons, and the further apart those prison bars become.
So, I guess one of the things I'm getting here is that when we talk about prison, we're also, in some instances at least, putting that in the same category as suffering. So prison and suffering, in some sense, could be said to be the same idea or the same thing. Is that right? Summer?
I think there's a.
Sorry, Adam, go ahead. You were saying something?
I think that there is certainly parallels there, and yes, that there's an element, I suppose, of freedom that comes as a result of suffering.
Is there? Would you like to elaborate on that? I think a lot of people would strenuously disagree with that statement.
Look, I know that the world we live in is one where suffering is avoided at great costs, and it's seen as being the worst thing that a person can have to put up with, is some level of suffering. But when I look at my own life, I examine that the greatest change usually has come about as a result of some sort of hardship and suffering. Not only habits and things like that, but actually wanting to go beyond just the when your physical environment is just not doing it for you, you start to say, what else is there? And you start to ask some more spiritual questions and reach out into other dimensions. And I think that's where one sort of suffering ends and another sort of joy begins.
Mm-hmm. Summer, any thoughts?
So yeah, I think that so what you were saying, that the prison of self is more where we are going through pain. Is that right?
Well, I think just listening to what we're talking about, there seems to be this, sort of an analogy between prison and suffering. It sort of seemed to be a similar thing, in some instances at least.
Yeah. So that's really interesting how you bring that up, because you also read you also read in the quote where it said, "To me, prison was freedom." So this is where it's really interesting, where you are looking at prison as suffering, yet here it's saying that it was freedom. So I don't know. How can you suffer? Go ahead.
No, I think you're about to say what I was going to say. So, yeah. Do you want to finish your thought?
So I was just going to say, how can something be? How can you suffer and yet that be freedom? It's a juxtaposition, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess if you're in prison and yet you're not, your mind is not oppressed. I guess that's another idea of prison, is oppression, if you're feeling oppressed. But if you don't allow yourself to be oppressed mentally, then how can you be imprisoned from a mental / spiritual point of view?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, but then also, going on with what you're saying in terms of the suffering, that the prison brings suffering, you can still, I suppose, you can still go through suffering yet be free at the same time. I
Mm-hmm.
suppose suffering doesn't equate to whether you are restricted or free. It's a process of going through something, and that's where that's where I think you also grow from that process of the pain. Um, and so being in that prison of self, I think we bring that upon ourselves to a certain degree as well. And that comes from attachments. And I see this all around us in today's society where we are so attached to, so many things like wanting the next best phone or the next best house. And so I think these attachments create a prison. We create our own prison like that.
Mm-hmm. So basically materialism. So
Yeah,
having our desires focused on material objects rather than something else.
that's right. Yeah.
Mm.
And when it goes on to say, when someone is released from the prison of self, that is indeed freedom. So
Mm.
when we let go of all of these attachments to materialistic things, then we are really truly free of, you know, um, being who we really are, not having the need to constantly compete with others. Um, yeah, there's just so many other dimensions. I mean, I could talk forever about that, but
Okay.
yeah.
Uh, did you want to say something, Adam?
Yeah, I suppose another key word in here is the word of service,
Mm-hmm.
um, because there's I suppose it might be possible to meditate yourself into happiness, but I don't necessarily think that's what is being referred to here. It's service is an act of doing something to help others in some way or another. Um, so I think that's part of the key to actually overcoming the prison of self as such.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point, and I guess I think there's maybe two ways of looking at that. One is the way you frame a situation. So if you're imprisoned for a cause, then perhaps that would be very different to being imprisoned falsely. For instance, if you were imprisoned for a murder you didn't commit, I think that would be far more of a far more difficult thing to deal with than if you were imprisoned for standing up for your moral rights or beliefs. So I think the way you actually frame being in prison. So of course Abdul Baha was imprisoned for his religious beliefs. So I think that certainly relates to this one. The second one is that service itself. So even it's an interesting one. Thinking about other people and focusing on the needs of others. I think it just has a quite an extraordinary impact. Even just saying, a prayer for somebody else, if you're in a difficult time, seems to change. Personally, I found changes my own mental state and can bring me out of like feeling down or feeling angry or depressed or whatever. Focusing on serving others has quite an impact.
Yeah, I suppose the more we think about ourselves, inevitably the less happy we'll be. But if we spend our time occupied with thinking of others and how we can help others, the more we'll. There's the old saying that if you seek happiness for yourself, you'll never find it. But when you seek happiness for others, you find it yourself.
And I think that, I mean, you kind of say that off the cuff, but maybe, I don't know, maybe we just understand that or accept that. But I have a feeling that's something quite maybe quite revolutionary for I don't know, people who are not Baha'is or someone else. That doing other things is doing things for other people really is does something for us, for ourselves. So I'm just looking at this one. So prison was freedom.
Can I jump in there, Chris, for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Just going on with what you were saying, I was just going to say that the narrative that we hear in society and the memes that come through, like on your Insta and Facebook and all that, it's very much inward focused, where you help yourself and then you can help others. Whereas what Adam was saying, and it's true, like society, I feel a lot of people, it's a very foreign thing, I think, with the saying that Adam mentioned. Because the focus has really been on us within, like help yourself first. And I think if we shift our mind to looking at, like as a mother, I feed my child first, or I look after the needs of my child first. And you can see the results of that when you do that. The child is grateful, and that brings joy to me when I do that. Whereas, yeah, go on.
No, carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when you only focus on yourself, I think there's the thread only goes so far, and then what? So, it's just, I just feel like it's there's only so much that you can do for yourself, but when you do it for others, it just brings a greater joy, not only for that person, but it brings joy to you as well.
So these concepts say of self-love and what are some of the other ones that come up quite often?
Put your mask on first and then help others.
Well, that one might make sense if you're on a plane. Yeah. If you're on a plane and it's going down and there's a lack of oxygen, making sure that you're actually capable is probably important. But once your basic needs are met, and I guess it's interesting as a mother, I think that's a very particular experience that probably Adam and I don't share, but maybe, I don't know, I'd be interested to hear maybe a little bit more, from a mother's point of view, how you kind of see that.
Well, I don't know. It's just, for me, my natural instincts just go to wanting to make sure that the needs of the children are met, right? So I don't think, and it frustrates me actually when I see that some people don't do that. It's like, I don't know.
What are the messages? What are the messages, though, I guess, that mothers get, or that women get in general, from society? Because I don't think that they kind of align with what you're saying.
There's this. Okay, so self-care. This word is being thrown around so much. You gotta have self-care. And if you don't look after yourself, then how can you look after your family? And to me, that's very foreign, because looking after my family gives me that energy and gives me that motivation to do more. And I'm not saying to, work your bones. What's that saying? Work yourself to the bones. You need to create that balance. But it's when you give, you get tenfold back.
So I have a feeling we've kind of strayed into a fairly major part, which is perhaps not exactly the sort of center of the prison of self, although it certainly reflects. Because I guess the question is, if you're a mother and you're not doing that, I guess my question is, what experience would you think you would be having if you put yourself all the time and you put yourself first all the time, instead of putting your children and family first, how would that be different, do you think?
Sorry, my mind drifted off elsewhere.
It's an interesting question, and I think, look, I think we can agree that I think particularly women. I mean, I just notice that there's this in media, in advertising. There's this idea of me put out there, as in you're the most important person, and you've got to focus on me time, all that sort of thing. Which, look, I kind of understand, but are we? I don't know. I guess my question is: are we becoming generationally more selfish? Are we being told that we should be selfish? If you compare it with previous generations who did work themselves to the bone just to survive. I was talking to a friend from Brazil just the other day who was talking about friends of his, he's in Australia, but back at home, who, they're going through a similar thing, lockdown or whatever. I mean, they don't even know whether they're going to have enough food. So, survival is an issue. Whereas here, it's kind of like survival's not an issue at all. But we're still thinking about, me. It's focused on the self. So it's a strange situation where everything's focused on the individual and selfishness, basically.
And we can even expand on that a bit more and reflect that. And you're right. I think society is becoming increasingly more self-centered and selfish. The ultimate is where we only care about ourselves and not anybody. And then if you took the next layer where we care about those who are close to us, like our family, which I think is a lot of what we see today, is that the level of care extends probably to our family. And then if we extended it further, we might care about the city we live in or even our country. But really, wouldn't the ultimate be that I'm not doing this for my family, or in fact, even it's going to bring hardship on my family, but for the society I live in, it's going to benefit them. So that's really hard. But at the end of the day, isn't that being less selfish in that, you're distancing yourself? Even, when I say distancing, of course, you're going to pour your love onto those around you and who you care about, but not limiting it to that, to go even further.
That sounds like sacrifice.
Well, and I think that's actually what is part of the key to freedom, because isn't sacrifice and suffering synonymous?
I don't think suffering is the same thing as sacrifice. You can suffer from a broken leg, you can suffer pain. Whereas sacrifice, if you're, and this is kind of what I was getting at before with previous generations, where they didn't necessarily have enough to eat, but they would go without to, say, put their kids through school. That's kind of sacrifice is something. It's not encouraged. Let's put it that way. Summer, I think you said it, before. we're encouraged to want the next. We're encouraged to want the next, phone, basically, whichever phone, iPhone, whatever, Android phone. Instead of, say, taking the money and maybe giving it to charity or giving it to spending it on something or someone else. It's like, oh no, I'll spend it on me. So, yeah, I'm not sure that they're the same thing. We're spending quite a bit of time on this, which is fine, but I did want to go down to one of the passages here. We've spent quite a bit of time on these concepts of prison, freedom, and suffering, and obviously we're saying suffering and sacrifice is another thing we've talked about, that they're definitely related to this concept. and also not focusing on the self seems to be a way to escape from the prison of self. I think they're kind of getting at that. But there's one of this down at the end here. I just want to. I'll just read this one again. Excuse me. So we've got, when this release takes place, one can never be imprisoned, which is fine. The next one is I guess what gets me, and what I find challenging. So Abdul Baha says, unless one accepts dire vicissitudes, not with dull resignation, but with radiant acquiescence, one cannot attain this freedom. Dire vicissitudes? Does anyone like to maybe define dire vicissitudes?
Do we have a definition of vicissitudes?
I guess my reading of it is just hardships. I haven't done a search on the meaning, but I don't know whether you guys.
So it's saying it's a change of circumstances or fortune, typically one that is unwelcomed or unpleasant.
Well, there we go. So dire vicissitudes.
This is real hardship.
Yeah, dire changes in fortune. So unless we accept, real changes in fortune, not with dull resignation, which is my general go-to, to be honest. Dull resignation, okay, yeah, no problem, let's have it again. But with radiant acquiescence, goodness me. Radiant, anyone want to maybe wax lyrical about radiant acquiescence? Acquiescence.
It's given permission, right? Isn't when you acquiesce, you give permission?
Acquiesce, yes. or just accept?
Yeah.
Acceptance. Consent, accept, yeah. So resignation, I guess, dull resignation is just like, okay, if you insist. But radiant acquiescence. So acquiescence is acceptance. Radiant? Anyone? What that means?
Just happy about it.
Do either of you guys have any stories where you've accepted dire vicissitudes with radiant acquiescence?
How many vicissitudes have we had? Mind you, I have actually, yes, I've had those experiences in my own life on a few occasions. There's been more than once where I must say you've lost everything and you go, now I've got nothing to worry about. But that's kind of related.
That kind of sounds like resignation. Not so much dull resignation, but I mean, I don't know. Radiant acquiescence to me, it sounds like, I don't know. I have to admit, I'm not on that plane. I'm not a fan of dire vicissitudes personally. I don't like them much at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a notch up from the idea that the concept that if you've got something that's precious to you, like a watch or something like that, and you give it away to somebody because out of love, you give that away, and if you're not happy about it, it doesn't really work. But if you really can give it away and feel genuinely joy, then you're, I think, starting to get into that plane. But we're only talking about giving away something minor here. This is like dire vicissitudes is huge. I mean, who would accept dire vicissitudes with full happiness?
Yeah. Like a pandemic. I mean, I guess a pandemic could be considered to be the dire vicissitude. To be honest, I think I've met that with annoyance, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I find this lockdown just really kind of annoying. Yeah.
But I'd accept that part of the key again comes back to service. If you're doing it to provide some service then it becomes different.
What if you're not though? What if it's just happenstance of life?
Well,
Yeah, like for someone who's in a war zone, for example.
Or health. What if you are diagnosed with cancer? I mean, that would be a very, very challenging experience. I don't know anyone who I've met um, who meets that with radiant acquiescence. On the other hand, let me maybe tell you a story related to cancer. Actually, I studied Chinese medicine many years ago for a little while, and as part of that, I worked in a clinic, and there was this guy who came in who had advanced cancer. He'd had it for a long time. And I don't know whether he was definitely going to die or what have you, but he actually, I would say he had this kind of radiant acquiescence. There was something about this guy who was very, very sick, but there was a particular type of vibe that he had, which was really interesting. So I wonder whether he'd reached that point of acceptance, of radiant acquiescence. And maybe if we had someone here who worked in a palliative care, in palliative care, they might come back with similar stories. It was just the only story I can think of. But when you just get, when you get to that point of just complete acceptance of the will of God, essentially, that we almost have no power. Perhaps that's when we come to that one. I'm not there yet, but yeah, that's the only instance I can think of.
Do you guys know Justin Belladoni?
The actor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know him
Yeah.
personally, but I know of him.
No, well, of him. He actually he's creating a movie about a young gentleman. Gosh, what's his name? Sobiak. That's his last name, but I can't remember his first name. Now, this young boy, he was fighting a disease as well, and he would, in my mind, he embodies this radiant acquiescence as well.
Mm-hmm.
He did not allow this disease, this cancer as well that he was battling, to stop him from furthering his education, from serving his community. And he took the cancer in his stride, and he used that as a motivation to touch people's lives by bringing awareness to the illness that he was facing. And so just the way he carried the little time that he had left in this world, and giving back and going through the pain of cancer, really embodies what we just are talking about here in this little last bit of the quote.
I think something happens when you're brought face to face with mortality.
Yeah.
It's a transformation, I think, that you can't manufacture. You can't we can't sort of create it by watching a movie or whatever. There's something really specific that happens, I think, when we're faced with the fact that our death is just something that we have no control, no choice about. It's going to happen. And I think those people who have illnesses like cancer, where they're brought face to face with it, and it's kind of like it's a long road, and they have time to reach that point, perhaps, of radiant acquiescence, of just accepting reality, accepting our impermanence in the world.
But it's very difficult for some to accept that, depending on how they look at death.
I think if you're a if you didn't believe in any sort of afterlife, that would be a challenge.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Adam, any maybe final thoughts on this topic?
My only thoughts are that I still can't get away from the idea that sacrifice and service actually go hand in hand, and that unless you can be happy about, unless you can sacrifice in the path of service, you really don't get the results from it. You won't get that condition that he's talking about, where you can be truly free.
Cool.
So, yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I've seen examples where people really have given their all, not for themselves but for others, and been truly happy as a person. And even though they have very little for themselves, they've made a big difference in the world. In fact, when you look at the people who've made the biggest differences in the world, our Mahatma Gandhis, our Mandelas, our Abdul Bahai himself. My God, what an example of a walking sacrifice. He just gave everything to help improve the condition of humanity, and they were not unhappy people. People flocked to them to receive just a little bit of the happiness and joy that they had within them.
Yeah, actually, I saw Nelson Mandela when he came to Melbourne, and he had a radiance. He definitely had a radiance, which is is unusual. Definitely unusual. Samar, any final thoughts?
For me, it's practicing the virtue of detachment to really gain that freedom from our own prison of self that we create. And it's a lifelong journey that we got to chip away at and be comfortable with where we are, and just have a goal where we're, working towards letting go. And it's just a lifelong journey.
Yeah, cool. Look, thanks, guys. Appreciate your thoughts and ideas about this topic. We had a few other quotes we were going to go through, but this one really we didn't really need any more than this. And to be honest, I get the feeling we could probably spend another hour or so unpacking all this stuff. I think there's issues and elements that I think are really so profound. One of the main ones, I guess, is the difference between selflessness and selfishness. And we have an entire industry geared towards making us selfish. Marketing and advertising are, companies spend billions of dollars every year on trying to get us to want more. So it's a challenge, and I wonder how much of the challenges that people face every day would be solved just by changing that focus from me to others, from what I want, from buying the next great phone, car, whatever it happens to be, to actually serving people and doing and sacrifice. So there's a lot more. I'm sure we could spend a lot more time unpacking this, but we'll leave it there for now, and we'll hopefully be back to talk about the next topic in a couple of weeks' time. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.